So this is my video presentation for my final major project in my extended diploma fine art level 3 course. Firstly, I'll look at my project concept within my project proposal. Just summarizing it quickly, I wanted to create an animated music video that followed the theme of social evolution alongside biological evolution. So showing the change between ape and man deciding to hunt, and hunter creating civilization around us as we know it. I also wanted to do this within a dreamlike world, so I could be creative with the environment. I could have the character move around to this world however I wanted. It gave me an awful lot of freedom to do it in this way. I also thought this would be appealing to a larger audience because it introduced this almost like nightmare horror aspect and this dreamlike surreal fantasy aspect to it. Yeah, I wanted this to run at 40 seconds to a minute 30 and target the audiences of 13 to 25. I then have my bibliography that has the sources that I've visited within the project and some planning I did on the weeks. So yeah, I'll go into my initial research now. Following this, I started looking at the animation as an industry, looking at like job roles, safe working practice, how to prevent things like carpal tunnel and back pain. Then looking at the environmental impact that animation has, both digital and traditional. Then looking at this a little bit further, going into again the job roles again, looking at different ways animation's made, different influential animators that I thought would influence me throughout the project, like Satoshi Kon, Max Fleischer, and some more. I then looked at the 12 principles of animation, things like squash and stretch within the animation to communicate more about the mass, anticipation, where like say you wanted a character to jump really high, you'd have to like bend their knees to make it seem more realistic within the animation. Just a lot of rules many animators follow to like create better quality animation pretty much. Then I looked at the different methods used to create an animation. Firstly looking at Coraline, a stop motion movie where they created these like puppets and then they'd move them ever so slightly, take another image, move them ever so slightly, take another image, and then this would create the illusion of movement. Looking at Toy Story for the 3D, where they created these almost like rigs and armatures of the character, and then they would move this, and then they would like almost animate over the top of this to create the final like render of it. I thought that was really interesting. I then looked at Spirited Away for the 2D animation, where they'd create these like two images with quite drastic movements in between them, and then they'd typically draw frames in between to create the illusion of movement. I then looked at a bunch of music videos, I also looked at a clip from a movie with music in the background that I thought would be really influential within my project. First looking at the Take On Me music video, which I thought would be really influential because I use the technique rotoscoping quite a lot, and this is a great example of it. Also the stylization I really liked. I then looked at this clip from Shaun of the Dead because they match the pace of the film and the music extremely well, and I wanted to use this like almost as like framework for the animation. Then looking at a Daft Punk music video because this particular Daft Punk music video is also part of a movie they made showing the where they prioritize visual storytelling. This was quite a good influence. Then looking at more 3D animation within a music video from the Gorillaz, and how they like implement this into a music video. I then mind mapped evolution, looking at just different things about evolution, like social evolution, Darwinism, the discovery of fire, different artists and different things that came out of this, like Richard Davis' work, Pearl Jam, the music video, Pearl Jam Do the Evolution, Octavio Campos' work. I then did some further research into this, looking at like things like the story of Lucy, being like quite a close human relative, how the bone structure is different to humans, but showing like adaptation through time. I then looked at some music videos, some games, and also a trailer for a series that had something to do with evolution. First looking at Fatboy Slim music video, where this like creature will like laterally move across the screen for the most part and eventually turn into a human, showing like the gradual change throughout time that created humans through evolution, and adaptation after adaptation. Then also looking at a music video called Do the Evolution by Pearl Jam, where they use 2D animation, they look at biological evolution, then go into social evolution. I thought this was very, very interesting. I also looked at a game called Spore that shows this like very diluted take on evolution, where it lets the characters create these characters and evolve with them, showing like natural selection and things like adaptation. They also let you create like your almost own animated armatures within this, if very similar to how they actually created Toy Story. They let the viewers in on this creation process. I then looked at a trailer for a series called Primal by Gendy Tartakovsky, because of how he also, similar to the Daft Punk music video, he really prioritizes visual storytelling, especially in the first season. I think there's no dialogue at all, and the actual plot is just a very twisted take on evolution, where it's this caveman, where it's almost like befriended this dinosaur, and it's a quite interesting twist on evolution. I then also mind mapped dreaming, similar to how I mind mapped evolution, looking at like both looking at dreaming, then mind mapping this out into nightmare feelings and things that are associated with them, looking at artists and medias again, like Francis Bacon, Paprika, Better Dreams, Yumi Nikki. I then did a little bit more research, but there wasn't too many more technicalities to research about dreaming in comparison to like evolution, so that's why this is quite small. I then looked at a music video called Better Dreams that I found really interesting, because the very like surreal environment around this character all the time. Also the color work is quite interesting, how they don't color certain parts to create this like disconnect. Yeah, I mean it's just an extremely surreal music video, like portraying dreams, that I thought was really interesting. I then looked at a music video called Nightmare by Love Automatic, because this portrayed like a very like visceral, like nightmarish depiction within this. They also use claymation to do this, which is like almost a take on stop motion animation, where you use clay, slightly move the clay, take another image, slightly move the clay again, take another image, create the illusion of movement. The splatting effect I found in this was quite influential. While my animation turned out nowhere near like as like visceral or gory as this music video, it still influenced me a little bit. Then I looked at a video game called Yumi Nikki that is about dreaming, and when this character goes into this dreamlike state, they explore these like surreal areas. They also use pixel art to do this. I found the backgrounds very like influential within this, because they were very like surreal and dreamlike, which is exactly what I was trying to communicate within my project, so I ended up taking a little bit of influence from this. Yeah. So following this, I decided to start my artist research. I started this by looking at Max Fleischer, because he used and pioneered, even invented the rotoscoping technique that was used within the Aha music video that I researched in the initial research. He did this by creating this like a rig, and then he would project these individual images from some film he had taken onto the paper. Then he would like trace each frame with his own character to like replicate the really fluid movement, which was like in contrast to a lot of the animators during this time creating very like robust animations. As you can see here, the little examples of it. I'll play a few seconds as well, just to show you this fluidity within the animation that he made. As you can see, he also used live action with this, which is also quite interesting. The rotoscoping technique was also extremely influential within the project. I then looked at animated series that he worked on, which was the Superman cartoon that he worked on, where he used this thing called multi-plane animation, where you can move two like layers separately. He would do this traditionally by just painting them on separate layers and then moving them, so you could create movement on one layer, movement on another. So say if you wanted a character to be communicated to be moving across a background, you could create the character doing the movement still on one layer, and then the background layer moving to like translate movement. This could also be used for like other things. It's shown in this video, but it is quite long, so I'll show you a few seconds that do translate this multi-plane animation. As you can see, like the curtain moves while the jewelry is like flashing in the background, showing this. This ended up also being quite influential within my project. I then looked at Edward Muybridge for his like fundaments of animation and how he actually inspired the creation of movement within animation and film, looking at just the basic repetitive taking of images that are then played in succession. Yeah, this influenced just the actual fundamentals of animation within my project. I then looked at Bill Sanderson that worked with evolution. His work showing this like merging of schools with like starting at the bottom with like very like old ancestors of humans, where you can see the school shape is different, how the school shape has evolved over time. Yeah, I thought this could be quite interesting. I also looked at this one that shows like almost like the family tree of a human, showing like how they came up from apes, and ending this with like this pedestal showing like technological advancements, which I use as like influence throughout some of my work. And looked at Richard Davis, where he uses this pattern to show evolution, and showing like how we've almost turned into numbers now because of the use of technology. I really liked this use of silhouettes. I thought it was really interesting. I did end up also getting inspired by this. I then looked at another thematic piece by Octavio Ocampo, where he shows evolution of man, starting with like ape turning into man, overlaying them, then merging them into this face in the background, and then I think present day with just a normal face in the background, and you can see like the industrial power plants in the background, referencing the pollution around us. And then the future, where it's got Einstein in the background with this like with that showing the like technological advancements and the intelligence and like how he develops society as a whole. Yeah. I then looked at Pittorio. This artist created like this very like nightmarish art that I thought could be interesting, because I think this captures horror extremely well. And yeah, I thought this could be very interesting to look at. I then looked at Satoshi Kon for his work on an animated film called Paprika, because the plot is so similar to what I wanted to do, with having like an almost Inception plot where it's this character inside a dream. As you can see, this dream like falls apart. There's almost different realities within mirrors, and they also create these very interesting transitions which were big influences, and the actual music used within the intro also influenced my choice of music, so I'll show you that really quick. Yeah, I took a lot of inspiration from this when she used the music and the transitions as well. I then looked at Francis Bacon for both his portrayal of movement And also his portrayal of horror with like the distortion of the figure, the splatting of the paint. This all was very influential throughout my work as well. I then looked at a series called Fooly Cooley. Looking at this series for both the character design, like the process throughout the character design, where you can see they try out different colors. They have like this very methodical way of showing this character design. Also, their use of something called impact frames, where they show like flashing of lights to show impact. They do it in like a geometrical pattern here, but also the very extreme angles that they use was something that I thought could be very influential, and it did end up influencing my animation. Then I looked at Looney Tunes for like really in-depth character design, some of the overlaying work, some of the framing work. I then looked at Gendy Tartarovsky for his character design, how he does these character turnarounds, and also his stylization throughout his work, because he creates these characters with almost no outlines, and he also does this throughout his backgrounds, creating this very interesting effect, like somewhat looking like it's card layered on top of each other to create these very like painter like stylized backgrounds, which I thought really interesting and really effective at communicating a background. I looked at some of his storyboarding, some more looking at how he doesn't use backgrounds and how this compares to the use of backgrounds within a lot of cartoons within this time. This was quite a major influence in my project as well. Following this, I decided to look into some storyboarding. So I looked at some of the Jurassic Park storyboarding, because I just thought it was really effective as storyboards, where they just did this simple like paneling. They used arrows. They just have this simple text below. So I linked a video that like shows the correlation between the storyboard and the film. I thought this was really useful to have as an influence, and I did end up using it as a lot of the influence throughout my storyboarding and my development of that throughout my work. Then I looked at how within like Japan, usually their animation is made from like source material from their like comics and graphic novels, and it's made quite differently because the line work is interesting a lot of the times, and it's the paneling as well is also very interesting. Extremely different to like the neat formatting on the Jurassic Park work. I'll show a few images of this. Just very different to this storyboarding. This also influenced me a bit, well, not as much as the Jurassic Park storyboarding. It was still useful to have researched. I then looked at screen tones, and I looked at an artist called Hajime Sama to like that uses screen tones throughout his work. In his like comic or graphic novel, he just used it to apply tone for the most part, and I think it's really effective in his work. You can see like here he's used some sort of screen tone because there's like almost a pattern at times showing that it is in fact a screen tone. This gradient I think is also a screen tone. Also his paneling I thought was quite interesting and ended up influencing me quite a lot. So yeah. Following this, I decided to start my experimentation, some of my idea work. So I started with gathering some photographs. I started this by going to the Birmingham Wildlife Conservation Centre to get some images of monkeys so I could show like the evolution path. Yeah, I think some of these were extremely effective. I'd taken an awful lot more than what I put in here, but I only used the absolute best because I wanted to create the best outcomes that I could. So this is just a small amount that I'd selected that I thought were very effective. I also chose ones that communicated like a bit of a narrative, like this one for example. I thought was great. I thought this is pretty good, so I could use them almost as experiments for storyboarding. I then went on to look at some backgrounds at the conservation centre. As you can see with these ones, as they're not too interesting, but they work as almost like wildlife backgrounds. And then I took some of architecture at London because this architecture was very interesting, I think. And if I wanted to show the civilization around us, I thought this would be a great way to show it within backgrounds. So I then went on to my to taking pictures for character design, where I didn't go too in depth. I just went into getting some very simple front view, side view, 3/4 view, so I could look at the best way to create things like character design sheets, and portray characters throughout this work. Then I started the experimentation, jumping straight into different animation techniques. I started with this cube I did moving across the screen. I used 2D animation to do this. It was very simple, but I also think it was quite effective. It didn't take me too long. I used squash and stretch, which was looked at within the 12 principles of animation. I just thought it was quite effective. Didn't take too long. I was very happy with this as an experimentation. Following this, I tried 3D animation. I don't think the 3D animation was as strong as the 2D animation. I had to use a YouTube tutorial to gain some insight into like some of the basics within this, and I think that shows that I didn't have too much experience within this software, and especially within animation in the software. I just don't think it's as strong, but I did notice that, or I did acknowledge that 3D might still be valuable within the project, but I think 3D would not be like a possible final outcome, but it might be useful as like a planning method. I then looked at traditional rotoscoping, which just did not work at all. As you can see, it's because I had printed the images from a video that I had taken of from walking towards the camera, and then I had printed off all these separate frames, and then I traced them all, and then I tried to photograph them and put them into this app to play them one after another to create the animation. But because I tried to do this within the 16:9 ratio, which made it extremely difficult to take these like pictures of the frames from the outside without making it like almost wobbly. You can also see the previous like images below because the tracing paper's layered, which wasn't a very good idea. It just did not work as well, and also it was also very time consuming, taking like 3 to 4 hours. So then I did some digital rotoscoping because that didn't work very well. I used the same reference imagery. This worked way better. There was no preparation like printing it off. It obviously was a lot more ethically better because I wasn't using all that paper. Yeah, this was just substantially better. It wasn't shaky like the other one. I even added a little bit more tone than I did in the last one. It's just a lot more consistent, a lot better. I carried this on throughout the project. I then looked at storyboarding, starting with graphite, which I depicted for these just like panels at times that I thought would convey a narrative. So I chose this image from the monkey I'd taken. Yeah, I thought this was quite effective, but it was just not time effective at all. It would have taken way too long to do a whole page of storyboarding with taking just 3 hours for a singular panel. It would have not been time effective at all, so I didn't take that any forward. But then, as like almost reflection on this, I tried charcoal out using this, which I thought would be way more time effective and create a similar outcome. It was a lot more time effective, but I don't think the outcome was anywhere near as strong, and it was also very ineffective at sustaining the storyboard because it would smudge everywhere. I'd have to put fixative on for every single different panel, which just wasn't a viable option, so I didn't end up taking charcoal forward either. I then did some overlaying experimentation where I used some of the images that I used for the rotoscoping, and I overlaid different amounts of them to see what would look effective in storyboarding, As you can see, the latter two are just not effective at all. I think the first two work, especially the first one, just to show movement within a storyboard. But yeah, following this, I did a mini storyboard, taking some stuff I've learned, taking like massive inspiration from the Jurassic Park storyboards. Yeah, just a simple storyboard telling a story, so I could get an insight on the techniques. I use the arrows like they do in the Jurassic Park storyboards to show movement. Yeah, I thought these were pretty good, but again, the tracing paper wasn't very good because it smudged. I think this would have worked better digitally. So I went on to screen tones and created this, showing like the almost a narrative between the two monkeys and them having a little argument from the images. I thought this was great, but very time ineffective. I do take this forward and act on this reflection later. I then tried one using action lines, like making the action lines actually part of the image. So I took the image, then I layered on top of it, layering out with these red lines all throughout the piece, and then I layered on top of this when I color picked, and then I create this image. I thought it was great. Again, it created a lot of intensity. That's what I tried to do, but it took way too long. I had to find a way to do this a lot more time effectively to take it forward. So at this point, I'd most likely thought that the screen tones was the best, but I needed to make it a lot more time efficient to take it forward. So then when it's character design, I create these quick little turnarounds where I trace the images. I match them up first with these red lines, and then I trace these images of my friends that I'd taken, just showing a character design really. I thought the blocky lines were really great. The off-tone grey separating it from the background works quite well. It portrays the figure from different angles. It definitely works. I think this like almost formatting was quite influential within the project. Happy I did it. I then tried some color work where I'd create a very thin line around the different parts on different layers, so I could just fill these layers with different colors. On this one I color picked, making it really close to the actual images. I then just used literally a couple seconds to create these like almost different color palettes, where I have this like interchanging one, this almost gradient going across the figure. Yeah, this color work was very effective, obviously very inspired by the Fully Cooley series I looked at and how they experiment their color work on the character designs. I then tried depicting tone on one of the figures using like the Aha music video stylization. I thought this was great, but this would be too time consuming if I had to do this for an entire animation. Then I looked at 3D character design, where I used the character design sheet I had already created, and I created these like 3D render for my mate. I thought this was really effective. I was really proud of this, but it was extremely time inefficient. It took me so long, 5 hours approximately, over like multiple sessions. But this gave me like a 360 view. So as what this didn't give me was a 360 view. This only given me like 3 angles, so here I had all of the angles, so I could work from it an awful lot better. I also talk about here how I would like to have added an armature, like they do within the Toy Story movie that I looked at within the initial research, but it didn't seem very doable within this circumstance. I then did some background work inspired by the Samurai Jack with the no outlines, sorry. I used the lasso tool for this. I thought this was quite effective at communicating what I wanted it to. I then did some more background work inspired by the Aha music video, this time like layering it, using like this tonal shading very similar to how they did it within the Aha music video, with the like hatching, cross hatching, different pressure. I really liked this this outcome. So then I got onto my final piece, where I started with picking the music, one that I thought could match the pace of the animation quite well. So I took inspiration from the movie I looked at called Paprika, with the like almost like sci-fi like music, because I thought this communicated like a dream really well within this, and I thought it'd also suit what I was doing. I picked out 3 songs that I thought all would work, but I thought the pacing in this one called Home by Resonance was the best, so I ended up choosing this one. I'll play a few seconds of it so you can get like the gist of the music. So yeah, then I went on to my like looking at my target audience more, looking at how whether like the music I've picked and everything was suitable for the age range I was trying to target in the project proposal, whether I needed to change anything. Then following this, I started planning. I wanted to split the animation into 3 parts. One part being the change between ape and man, the next part being the change between man becoming like a hunter, and then the change between like the hunter creating the civilization around us. Yeah, then I talk about my method of the animation within the first part and the stylization, which for the first part I mostly just used rotoscoping, which is a major influence on Max Fleischer, where I'd trace the frames of the video so I could get like the right fluidity, right proportions, while doing my own like compositions and composing it how I like by editing it within the software. I would also do this in like a stylized way, using like this almost like charcoal pencil effect to create like this instability throughout with like sporadic line work that was very inspired by the Aha music video. I then go on to explore this more, and then I also look at how I'm going to storyboard this and the type of media I was using, which ended up being a lot of the media I'd got prior in this project to depict the monkey at the start, and then I took some video of myself to show the change to man with almost this like morphing effect. Yeah, I took major influence from Hajime Isama and the Jurassic Park storyboards for screen tones and applying tone to the work. Also the like paneling and zooming in on expressions inspired me, and just the formatting for the storyboarding. So then I made these storyboards for the animation, portraying what I want to portray in the animation. Then I have my part 1 done. Yeah, I got some feedback on this. I did my own reflection on this. I then acted on this reflection to make it better. Yeah, I'll show you the storyboard versus animation for this part. As you can see, this was like very accurate to the storyboarding, showing like the planning was quite effective within this part. I also showed the layer process, because I layered a lot of this to like show shadows, grass, different parts, like some of the sporadic line work I did on separate layers. I won't view this here because it'll make the presentation way too long, but I've shown that. I then got on to my second part, where I took inspiration from when I had depicted my friend within like a 3D plane within the experimentation and the idea work. So this time I wanted to do this again, but do this in a different way, taking more aspects from another YouTube video I looked at. I then also wanted to add an armature, because I didn't get to do this last time, very like inspired by the Toy Story animation and how they can move this figure. I also wanted to do this, so I did this time because the first part was a lot more time efficient, so I had time to add this armature. This should have made it very easy to plan the animation out. I would have the figure like very proportionally correct and everything. it wouldn't be sinking too much time straight into the animation being in 2D. It would first have this like really in-depth plan almost. So as you can see, I added the armature. I also, because it wasn't working too well at the start, I had to change the weight paint. So you'd paint the parts that correspond to the mesh and the bone. Yeah, so say if I would have moved this arm on the picture on the right, it would have moved part of the leg and part of the back, which isn't correct, but this one is correct because I've just painted the leg part, and this would have been corresponding to the bottom of the leg, so it would just move that part. Then I show the initial pose. I go more in detail on what I wanted to portray within this part. So what I did want to portray was this, showing this figure. I wanted this figure to be posed in the same way the monkey was posed. I then wanted him to throw the camera away, and then pointing into the distance where the sunrise takes over the screen, and then that transitions into like a hunting part where it shows a hunter shooting an arrow, and then it hitting the floor, and then I'll have the scene end with the character falling into this world, creating this like very nightmarish feel. Yeah, this was very inspired by the Toy Story animation that I looked at. Also the dark background and the distortion of the face, inspired by like Francis Bacon, Yumi Nikki. There's also some more inspirations within this, but I'm going to absolutely all of them now. Yeah, I'll show the storyboard animated next to the animation, so you can also see the 3D work here next to the final animation in 2D. Yeah, so then I went on to the reflection, where I got some feedback again. I did my own reflection. I changed a little bit of it to make it more effective in communicating what I wanted it to. And then went on to part 3. This part going into civilization, where I wanted to show some architecture and also some technological advancements to show like the civilization around us. For this, I again used a very different method of animation, because within the second part it's a mix mainly between rotoscoping, using the 3D as like the draft, and just normal hand-drawn animation. But this time I was using mainly something called tweening, where the computer moves it for you, which was done partly for time efficiency because I was running out of time at this point. But alongside this, I also thought this would like create the robust mechanical movement that shows like technology. This is like inspired by Bill Sanderson, how he references the birth and the development of technology within civilization. And then I went into this a little bit more in depth, where I say I wanted the character to start in an elevator, I wanted this elevator to go down, showing the architecture around us. For this, I picked a piece that I did early in the project, which was trying the stylization from the Aha music video, because I thought this worked so well. It also linked to a lot of the stylization I'd been using throughout the project. Yeah, so here I also went over it in like 3 layers of this brown digitally, and then I erased parts of the layers to communicate the tone again. I did this in a brown to show like both the structure of modern architecture, but also how like say Rome is built with stone, which material that is brown at a lot of points, to try and communicate that as well, so I can communicate different points of architecture and how civilization has changed throughout time. So, and then I have the elevator door close again, and then I have it change into like an alarm of somebody waking up, really confirming that this is like a dream to the character. So yeah, I then put these 3 parts together, and this is my final outcome. Yeah, so that was my final piece. There's obviously a lot more detail to go into within the writing. Obviously, I'm not going into that right now because it'll take way too long. Um, I think after viewing the final piece, it's very evident that the artist research that I looked at throughout the project was very, very influential throughout my work. As you can see, like the Aha music video is inspired through a large portion of the animation using rotoscoping and the stylization. Also, Max Fleischer inspiring this rotoscoping in more of an in-depth, methodical manner. As you can see, like across here, the sporadic line movement, like the Aha music video, the morphing and distorting here, like inspired by like Francis Bacon, and also Octavio, where he like morphs and overlays. I'm trying to do a quite similar thing here. The zooming inspired by like Hajime, now he zooms into expressions. Major influence within the 3D drafting I did to accomplish this figure, being inspired by like Toy Story and how they create their armatures and their rigs for their characters. Also the sporadic line work I do on the faces here, being like very inspired by like Francis Bacon and how he portrays like fear, while it's quite small compared to the others. Even the background here being black was inspired by like the desolate background in Yumi Nikki at times. Like the background work here being very inspired by like Samurai Jack and how he does no outlines within a lot of his backgrounds, because I wanted to create this like almost paintery like feel at this point. Then I think you can also see the transition where the sun engulfs the screen and then turns into this fire, being like very inspired by Paprika and the transitions within that. The multiplane animation with the clouds moving being inspired by Max Fleischer. The silhouette work here being inspired by like Richard Davis. The color work here being separated, some being black and white, some being colored, being inspired by Better Dreams, and how they separate the color to create this like almost disconnect between the reality and the dream. Evolution and dreaming work being very present throughout the entire animation. Finally, I'll just do a very, very brief talk about my final evaluation. I think that I did what I stipulated in the project proposal. I communicated evolution, societal and biological in this dreamlike state. I think the pace matches the music quite well. As I just explained, I think the artist research was very influential. It was all quite in depth. I thought it could have been a little bit more critical at times of who I picked, because for example like the Looney Tunes art didn't influence me as much as I would have liked, but they all influenced me a little bit, so it's not detrimental. I do talk about how the project proposal I think was a little bit too adventurous, because it created this almost like ever so slight drop off in quality as the time went on within the animation. But I still think the animation as a whole is great quality, so I wasn't too worried about this. But it did also create a lot of stress having to do like such an adventurous animation with such depth in the project time that had been given. So I think it would have been a little bit better if I had toned it down a little bit, done a little bit more of a basic topic, so I could definitely have amped up the quality a little bit. But I still think it was great quality and a good project proposal. And then talk about the show that we did at college, my show statement. Also mention the presentation and how this can be viewed pretty much anywhere because it's digital. Most people have a smartphone in the modern times. You can just view it on YouTube, but here, like, I used the USB to translate it with a little segment of writing next to it explaining it. Yeah, in conclusion, I thought that This all went pretty well. While there were definitely like parts to improve upon, like there were a couple frames at times which just weren't the best quality, which I would have hoped I would have liked to improve upon. Um, I think it was a good first step, and I think it was a massive difference between this project and the last project in the quality of animation.